Prediction markets have developed quite the strong foothold in American culture recently. They are allowing people to predict on a wide range of outcomes in sports and culture. And that word predict is changing the landscape. In many cases, predicting has become a far more novel approach than betting, but there are some similarities. So, what are prediction markets doing right now? And a pleasure to be joined by Wharton Professor Adi Wyner. Adi, great to talk to you. Thanks very much for your time today.
Well, it's good to be here with you.
Thank you. I guess let's start with the development of these markets and how they have kind of come into our culture, especially in the last few years, and the place they have kind of developed in the gaming realm over the last couple of years.
Well, let's take a step back. So, the idea behind the prediction market begins with basically a theory called the wisdom of the crowds, which is the observation that large numbers of people, their collected average thoughts are better than experts, and that has held up in lots of areas, not exclusively, but in particularly say in sports and in predicting political outcomes. And there was online prediction markets that didn't involve trading money, but allowed people to kind of put their predictive probability on an event. They would average them up and you could track them. And that, for example, I remember in the 2016 election or 2008 election, you could see these prediction markets track a future event, and there was no money being waged, but they were thought to be very reliable. So the next stage of the prediction market evolution was when it allowed people to actually put money down on their predictions, and that changed it. And it's not a book, so it's very
Yeah.
different from the historical sports betting.
But what kind of impact is it having on traditional betting right now? I mean, how much of the money is moving from the online gambling component over to prediction markets?
Well, that's hard to say because everybody's growing, right? So nobody is market share is kind of hard to figure out because everyone's going like gangbusters. The fan duels and the online sports betting industry is growing like crazy. And so, yeah, they're probably losing some business, but they're also getting others in other ways. They make money differently, but I'm not sure. I don't know the exact data on whether people are moving. I mean, basically, you move because you feel you get better odds in one location versus another, and you move because you might think you get better fees or you might get better service. I know that the fan duels and the gaming companies are very big on promotions, trying to get you to come in with attractive offers. The betting markets don't do that.
Well, and I think to a degree, at least from the outside looking in, that the prediction markets are viewed as maybe more attractive, just in general, more of a niche connecting with the public right now than say the traditional betting markets. Those are still doing very well, but there's something that's connecting with the consumer, it feels like.
Well, sure, you can bet on anything, right? And you can even propose a bet that's not even there and see if someone will take it. So you can bet on, oddly enough, you can bet on whether the second coming of Jesus Christ happens by January 1st. You can actually bet on that. So you can bet on anything you want. Lots of things are being offered, and you can see what they are and the prices that are being offered, and you can propose new ones. And that has an attractiveness that goes way, way, way beyond sports.
So it brings the consumer in at a level that maybe they never were at before, correct?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you could stand back, and this is not something that I have expertise in, is psychologically. Like, what do betting markets do to people that get them to be interested in? And I would just speculate that I think it has to do with feeling deeply involved, right? So it takes something that you might have a casual interest and sharpens that interest and focuses it and makes you much more interested in it because you have proverbial skin in the game, right? So you care more, right? I was walking out of a Yankee game where the Yankees had lost, and someone ahead of me was just screaming about the Yankees' bad play, and I'm thinking, wow, I haven't seen anyone get that excited about a Yankee game, and the Yankee lost in a long time after 162 games in the season. A loss is just another day. And then he turned around and said to me, "I don't care about the Yankees. I put money on it."
Well, and so there's the other component of this is how sports have kind of adapted to having that gaming component more of a normal part of the day-to-day operation, and this is every sport kind of across the board. It used to be verboten for the longest time. There were no pro teams in Las Vegas, and now look how things have changed over the last 15 to 20 years.
Well, certainly internationally, the other countries have taken the lead on that. So Europe and Asia has long and had much more rigorous and robust betting markets. And those, of course, have been exploited. There have been scandals where players and fans have colluded, and there's deep, dark underbelly to having such a large betting market. And we've in the United States have always tried to avoid that. That may have been because of our different moral values, you could say, or just history. And we've really dropped the those obstacles, and they have caused problems. There are already lawsuits. There are examples of players and people involved in the game who have been accused of using their positions to influence betting markets.
How does an entity, and I read yesterday about the connection that obviously the prediction markets have to have with an agency like the CFTC, the Commodity
Mhm.
Futures Trading Commission, and the fact that these contracts are being kind of reviewed and looked at by that agency, which I think is a unique component to it. It feels so much different than traditional gambling because
Well,
of there's this oversight.
okay, let's just be 100% clear. It's gambling.
Yeah.
It is gambling. Now, you could step back and say, what's the stock market if it's not gambling? Well, stock market serves a lot of functions that aren't gambling for businesses, for individuals. And also the stock market goes up, right? So when you buy into the stock market, you're betting, you're essentially making a bet on the economy, if you'd like, on individual companies. And we consider those things good because they have upside utility, right?
Right.
But if you stand back and think about it, if I'm going to be betting on whether the S&P 500 goes up or down tomorrow, which I can do with an option and in many ways, how is that different from betting on the Yankees? The answer is it's really not in any structural way. So now that you take these prediction markets and expand the betting event pool to something much, much larger, you're essentially getting involved in gambling. I don't know how to
Yeah.
say it that way, but it is
Yeah.
gambling if you define gambling as essentially making a wager on an outcome for which you have no say or no party involved, and it's not a hedge. I mean, you can use it as a hedge if you're in certain ways. So it just does not that they don't have economic utility, and they certainly have entertainment value, but it is gambling. So when you ask the question, does it feel better because there's a government agency involved? Well, that helps because a lot of these events are hard to define. Like it's a
Right.
second coming of Jesus Christ. Well, what is that going to mean, right? How do you know when
Yeah.
that's over, right? And so there's a lot of that has to be regulated so that there aren't conflicts and people saying that this happened or it didn't happen, and that's really what kind of makes this a little bit more official. Because imagine making a bet with a friend over something wild
Yeah.
and then disagreeing on whether the event actually took place or didn't take place. So that sort of helps settle these contracts. They are business contracts. They do, and they have economic force. They are legal, binding contracts, and you then to make the whole thing work better, you do need regulation.
So then when you think about the future of how prediction markets are going to look to continue to grow, just the fact that there are so many potential questions or ideas that can be put into a contract as we move forward. I mean, basically anything is out there available. That just kind of, leaves us with the potential for continuous growth year after year after year.
I suppose so. I mean, obviously, there should be some sort of saturation. There are certain people who will just never do this, right?
Right.
And that, I mean, my wife had no idea that there's such a thing as a prediction market and is never going to find out and would never be interested. Obviously, lots of other people have been in this game for a while. So then you're now starting to fight for the middle ground, where you're going to go on that. I typically have almost never done a couple bets on it, mostly out of curiosity individually, not out of desire. There is a fee, right? So you do pay money. I mean, you think that it's a feeless transaction, but no, there is a fee. It's not a huge fee, but it is a fee, and there's money to be made by the providers, and that money has to be paid by the bettors. So,
Yeah.
and I have no special insight, right? So I don't. I mean, obviously, if I put my statistical talents potentially to work, I could gain an edge. But as I've like to say, I mean, I'm gonna years and years and years ago when I was a grad student, I became some of an expert in card counting and blackjack. And I would go to Vegas and other places and make a little bit of money. And then I realized a job is more profitable, right?
Yeah.
So so yes, there are people who will do this, but and will enjoy it. But I'm not going to spend my time, available time, trying to beat the market when I have other ways of doing this. Other groups can really put together their books, their energy, their intellectual power, and do it, and they are.
Looking at it from a statistical perspective, then longer term, does one or the other, prediction markets or traditional gambling, have a better kind of long term view in terms of the success that they are looking to have?
Predicting the future is hard, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. So I don't. I think the books, the traditional sports books, are just a lot easier. You know, you don't have to settle. The books make the prices, right? Um, and So I can't say whether or not one will do better than the other. Um, I, I think they're both. There's plenty of room for everybody to get involved.
Yeah.
Once it's really marketing, right? So I think the the sports books know how to get you to become their customer and stay as your customer.
Right.
And I don't know whether the prediction markets are working as hard on that. They don't offer the promotions and plans to get you hooked. They also, on the other hand, don't try to keep you out. One of the things that a sharp, a excellent bettor, they call that, will generally be denied a service at the sports books if they prove to be too good a bettor. And certainly they will be denied all those promotions, which makes sense. You don't want to be giving all these promotions to the excellent bettors. But they have historically, and this is something that I haven't researched, but I've certainly read about, and talked to some of my friends who are professional gamblers. They'll say that the sports books do their best to keep them out, and the
Right.
prediction markets, at least as far as I can tell, don't care about that because there's a counterparty, right?
Right.
So when you make a bet, there's someone on the other side. In the sports book, the person on the other side, the entity on the other side, is the book, not an individual. So
Right.
they have skin in the game as well. They don't want to be bet. They don't want to be there, see their lines saturated with professionals, because they actually make money not just on what they call the vig, which is the advantage that they have, because the bets don't sum to one; they sum to something greater than one, and that advantage is traditionally earned by the book. But they can take lopsided books, which means that they're actually taking a position, and they like to take positions because the public likes to take bad bets, and
Right.
so they make. It's hard to know unless you saw their inside information, but articles have been written and published historically that show that about half their money is made on the vig, and about half is made on bad bets. The prediction markets don't make money on bad bets. That's not how it works. They make money on their fees. That's it.
Adi, always great to talk with you. Thanks very much for your time today. All the best.
Terrific. Thank you. Always glad to join. Bring me on and talk about something else at any time.
Absolutely. Adi Wyner, Wharton Professor, joining us. And we should mention as well, co host of the Moneyball podcast each and every week, right here on the Wharton Podcast Network.